What a week indeed.
I have like 20 things open. Okay. Hello and welcome back to Public Access America's season 7. I love that we're in season 7. It's so cool. I'm flustered. We got a lot going on I love changing things up, every season. So we got a new theme, like at this, immersive wise. I love that. And we're working on a new theme song, which you might have just heard if you're listening to the podcast on Spotify and Apple and TuneIn and Victor Reader. Jeffrey, I did not have I did not like the news this week. There wasn't a lot that could be tied back to more of a community conversation. You know what I mean? It was all just national chaos. So I just closed myself off from it and didn't have a lot going on. So I thought I'd start with a PSA, and that is you have to know your body enough when you're buying a butt plug so that it doesn't go in unexpectedly. I was listening
That's
to Dan Savage, and there was a story about a glass butt plug, and I was like, oh, we got to tell people you need to shop better for your butt plugs if you're going to use a butt plug. Know your body.
yeah, definitely. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like,
Hmm.
anytime you're gonna go buy a sex toy, it's one of those. Like I get like people have a hard time talking about this sort of stuff, but you have to think about the fact that if you're going out to a store to go buy it, it's okay to ask questions.
Oh yeah. Oh
and,
yeah.
and highly encouraged, in fact, to ask questions so that way you can kind of know what it is that you're going to get yourself into or get into yourself. I mean, really,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah,
just
if you're gonna buy a butt plug, you're gonna probably tell somebody about it, right? And then you're gonna want to explain that better. So having more information is better than not. And destigmatizing it, yes, just saying people buy and give sex toys all the time.
yeah.
You need to research it better. Like it always amazes me when somebody that doesn't know somebody else buys them a sex toy, because how would you know that person's body just yet? You know what I mean?
Exactly, and I would even argue too that you might have some consent issues at hand there as well when you're buying
Yeah.
someone a sex toy, and they're not expecting to receive that from you. I wouldn't say it's I mean it's definitely unexpected, and
Yeah.
just I would say be if you're going to gift something, be thoughtful. Make sure you talk to them. Hey, is this something that you would be willing to get as a
Mhm.
gift? I mean, and then the answer may be no, and that's an acceptable answer.
Right, but it's a fun conversation.
That's true.
You're gonna mm, you're gonna learn about somebody's limitations.
Yeah. Like how far a butt plug can go before it disappears.
It made me think, what if they made like a candy sort of dissolvable butt plug that only lasted an hour and then just like dissolved, you know?
Well, I mean, they would obviously have to do some research just because, like, sugar
Yeah,
directly into your colon is probably like if you're a diabetic, that's going to be a bad day. That's a bad
that's a
day.
bad day. Yeah, that's fun.
Whereas, maybe there's something you can do that's dissolvable, doesn't really mess with your
Right,
internals so much. But I mean, like this isn't the first time I've heard of something like that happening. In fact, there
right.
was there's something here not that long ago where someone was using another some food as a sex toy, and they got it
Mm,
lost for a significant amount of time and ended up going into toxic shock.
wow.
Um, so you have to be careful. Like
Hmm.
anytime that you're going to be doing anything like with sex toys or not sex toys.
Right. I think I think it comes down to trust. You need to build trust. Sex isn't about domineering or pain or anger. It's about trust.
Unless you
So
want it to be about those things.
yeah, if you want it to be about those things and it's consensual, by all means, but have that discussion. But I think it comes it comes through trust. You can't just choke somebody on your first date. You gotta talk to them.
I mean, that's fair.
Yeah, I
Granted,
guess.
I would say that most of my exes want to choke me, but not in the fun, sexy time sort of way.
Yeah, right. No, I totally get
I mean,
it.
even I want to choke me. Wait, hold on. Um,
Jeez. Who was
you know,
that? In Excess. Who was that guy? Poor guy.
uh, and don't forget David Carradine as well.
Oh man, Kung Fu, one of the greatest TV shows of all time. I
I
forgot
mean,
about him. Wow.
like people don't understand like how important sex is
Mm-hmm.
in their own relationship, like either with themselves or with someone else or
Mm-hmm.
with multiple partners. You know, everybody has their own needs and desires, and I'm certainly not the best person to be talking about this.
Me
I mean,
neither.
this is definitely another Debbie conversation.
Oh, I know. I just threw it in as a segue because I had another butt plug story.
Well,
A
so
human,
so
a human butt plug story. Sorry.
wait, we're going to talk about Trump again.
Kind of.
um I mean, you know, like I said, consent is important. Understanding what your sex needs are is important. Communicating that
Mm,
is important. And I'm going to leave it at that because there are better people to talk about this than me.
me too. I'll just say that when you discover something, you're not a professional, so don't go at it like a professional. Learn. I had a friend that um Dom submissive thing was a thing, right?
Hmm.
And it was so I got to learn about that because I was like, do I want to be a Dom? I don't like hurting people. And I realized after a lot of research, it isn't about that. It's about gaining trust, and for certain people, that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for as much sexual gratification as trust, and I like that. So let's leave it at that. So
Yeah.
let's go with I mean, I'm going with like the state butt plug, which is
Butt plugs
Texas.
for 200. Oh,
Butt plugs for 200 days. So
there you go. That's the
Matthew,
title of the episode right there.
butt plugs for 200. So I mean, I honestly thought he was a butt plug. I mean, most of my life. And Matthew McConaughey is considering running for governor of Texas. And I was like, not the dazed and confused guy. No, not the Lincoln guy. No, like, but then I read the article and I guess he gets it. I don't know if he could fix it. He's talking to mentors that he won't mention names, saying that he's looking into it. It's just, can you picture the dazed and confused guy as governor of Texas as reform?
I mean, could we picture Trump as president? At this point, anything's open game
Oh my God, or Arnold Schwarzenegger.
as governor of California. I mean,
Yeah.
realistic, and I'm sure they said that about Ronald Reagan back in
Hmm.
the day too.
Sure, sure.
Wait, you mean the Western movie guy? You know,
Yeah. What did he do with he had Western movies with a monkey, right?
I forget what he
Yeah,
had.
me too.
I mean, realistically, the idea of celebrities moving into politics at this point
Hmm.
doesn't surprise me. Um, I will say that it concerns me, um, because it's not like there's been a super great track record when it comes to celebrities as politicians. I mean,
Right.
Reagan did a decent enough job. He was fucking crazy. I won't say that he was the greatest president, but I would say that he was what I would argue that he was what was needed at the time to counter the Soviet Union.
Sure. And he built a cabinet, a pretty good I mean, for the right side. He built a
Hmm.
really good cabinet and then listened to the people.
That's the important part is that he listened to his cabinet.
Right.
And then after that, it kind of becomes hit or miss. I mean,
Hmm.
Schwarzenegger wasn't exactly the greatest governor, but he wasn't the worst either.
Yeah, that was so far away. I don't know how he did. You know what I
I
mean?
don't, I mean, he did well enough to get himself elected, and
Hmm.
it wasn't exactly I would say it wasn't exactly what everybody wanted or expected, but I mean, I don't know what you expect from, a celebrity running as a Republican in a very heavily Democratic state. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with he probably didn't do as terrible of a job as some people would like to say, but it probably wasn't the greatest job either.
Yeah.
Um, and then you get Trump, of course. uh,
Hmm.
another celebrity as, president.
Right.
And well, we know how that went. That was
He,
hot trash.
he didn't pick a good cabinet and didn't listen to them. And I
I
think
would
that's the
argue,
big difference, I think.
no, I would argue that his initial cabinet that he picked was actually a good cabinet because the decisions that started being made from that initial cabinet were working. They were doing great. You had things like companies were actually raising wages to $15 minimum.
Mm.
You actually had business growing at an insanely fast rate. You had low cost of goods. I mean, for a hot minute, the American standard of living was on the rise, and I mean, it was much to the pain of Democrats that was happening. But like all things Trump, he went from we did this to I did this to I alone can fix this, and he alone did exactly what he did. He made decisions and they were disastrous. You know, like we've talked about plenty of times. The Chinese forced technology transfer, bad deal that needed to be addressed. All the
Yeah,
other shit, stupid as fuck.
pretty much.
Picking on our European allies and trade over there, also a bad day.
Well, yeah, it depends who you're best friends with. That's all I don't think I
Right.
think Paul Ryan stimulated the economy with a jolt of a trillion, almost $2 trillion nitrous, and I think that helped the economy, but I don't really think Trump did. I mean, I suppose he had some cabinet members, but he had some that were buying like used mattresses from Trump Hotel. You know what I mean?
Well, I
So,
mean, yeah. When you look at some of the picks that he had, though,
mhm.
when it came to technology, he had Elon Musk. I mean, whether or not you like the guy is irrelevant. The guy's good at what he does.
Well, and he's looking to keep that on an even platform. Like he's incentivized to watch China in that department. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
He doesn't care about fruit delivery. He cares more about forced technology transfer.
He had Linda McMahon as the head of the Small Business Administration. I
Did
mean,
that work?
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
The so a lot of the tax incentives that you see that get passed,
Hmm.
while they overwhelmingly benefit large corporations, there were a lot of changes that actually benefited small business during that time as well. And I mean, even so much that, some friends and family that I have, changed their business structures during that time, and it was more beneficial to them as a small business. So, I mean, there were like we hear a lot about what happens for large corporations because let's face it, they're everywhere. But even
Yeah.
still, there were changes made for small businesses that actually made sense and actually, I would argue gave them the chance to be a bit more competitive. But of course, a lot of those benefits also went to large corporations as well. And so it just didn't quite balance out the way that they planned it or the way that they thought it
Right.
would work, but it still gave small businesses a leg up that they didn't necessarily have before.
Okay. I didn't even expect to get on the Trump cabinet at this today. I love that. Oh my God, Betsy DeVos was horrible. Can we
That
agree
was
on
no,
that?
that was a terrible pick. I
All
don't.
right.
That was awful. That was
All
not
right.
a good pick
All
whatsoever.
right. That's cool.
Um, I would say James Mattis though as
Oh
defense secretary
yeah.
was a
There you go.
fantastic pick. Like he was a great pick, but he couldn't deal with Trump.
Right.
I mean,
Good.
when I say he was a fantastic pick, I mean from a military perspective. I don't mean
Hmm.
from a policy perspective.
Oh, I get it.
And Mattis understood like where our fights were. Mattis understood that Syria was a bad idea, but once we got in there, abandoning our allies was a terrible decision. He
Right.
understood that we needed to wind down the wars, the war in Afghanistan, but Trump had to do it his way, and so Mattis was like, I can't do this.
Totally agree. Um, so back to Matthew McConaughey, what I have a problem with is the celebrity politician, like the Elizabeth Warren and the Donald Trumps being treated like rock stars instead of just being a politician and doing the politician job, you know? I've
Hmm.
noticed I noticed today there was a story about how corporations are donating to criminal justice reform organizations, but they're not actually promoting it. And it feels to me like we're asking the private sector to do what politicians won't do, which means politicians aren't doing what we're paying them to do. They're outsourcing it to corporations to do their, and it just seems really messed up.
You
So
know,
I don't like the politician. I don't like the celebrity politician. I would hope that they would go back into obscurity and we don't talk about them unless they accomplish something, you know?
unfortunately, that door is open, and the reality is that I would say that social media makes the celebrity politician far more viable than it ever would have been.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah,
and in
yeah,
terms
yeah.
of like outsourcing to corporations, I mean, this can be six of one way,
I
half
know.
a dozen another.
I
You know,
know.
uh,
This gets
and I
to the
think
heart of our ideals, kind of, doesn't it?
it does.
Yeah.
For me,
Mhm.
I don't like. I think it really heavily depends when it comes to prisons, for example. I think outsourcing prisons is terrible because, like
Mhm.
everything else, private sector is about supply and demand.
Yep.
And when you create a set of for-profit prisons, that what that means is that you have now created a demand for prisoners. And I think that's a terrible decision because as society as a whole, when it comes to our jails overfilling, we need to be taking an objective look at why our jails are overfilling and start to understand, is there something going on in society that we're criminalizing that we shouldn't be. Overwhelmingly, it's been the war on drugs, and
Mhm.
as so far decades of incarcerations have shown, jailing people for drugs has not worked, not fucking once. It has not worked the way that
For nonviolent crimes, right?
for nonviolent crimes. It has not worked the way that people think that it thought that it would. I mean, don't get me wrong, when it comes to violent offenders, yes, prison is, exactly the place where we need violent offenders. That's
Hmm.
kind of where it's supposed to be. I mean, you look at it, and even in the historical past, you know, you had the community deal with people who had issues of sobriety and whatnot.
Right.
Jailing them was not the solution, but it became a solution because, well,
Hmm.
you got beds that have to be filled, or else, if you don't have a certain number of prisoners, you're going to end up paying for that space.
Sure. And if you cut the social net and they don't have other options for their mental illnesses, we outsource that to our prisons and make our prison guards psychologists.
So the idea that for-profit prisons exist is quite heinous, because what it does
Hmm.
is it, like I said, it creates the demand for prisoners, but it also keeps us from fundamentally and objectively looking at what we're doing as a society that's leading to people being in jail.
Hmm. It
And
depends on
so,
who's in jail. Like, why would we fix it if minorities are the ones that we're locking up? You know, that's its intent. It's running the way it was designed.
oh, I'm not saying that it's not running the way it's designed. It's running exactly the way it was designed.
Yeah.
And what I'm also saying is that the way that it's designed is meant to keep us from fundamentally looking at what's going on,
That's right.
and learning as a society where things need to change.
It reminds me of one of my favorite Rick and Morty lines. It just seems like slavery with extra steps.
Oh, it is slavery with extra steps, especially because it's legalized in the 13th.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, that has to be changed. Slavery should never be a form of punishment, and I believe that slavery as a form of punishment violates, what is it, cruel and unusual punishment. What amendment is that? Is that the fourth?
You got me.
I think it's the fourth.
We're gonna have to throw some constitutional references in our shows, aren't we?
Yes, you are.
Nice. All right. So before we segue, I actually had a.
Cruel and unusual punishment is the eighth amendment.
All right. And I,
So
yeah.
yeah, it's to me, slavery, especially, especially when you look at it from a historical context, it is cruel and unusual punishment. It is the definition of cruel and unusual punishment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I
Ooh,
think that that clause of the 13th violates the Eighth Amendment.
I like that. So let's go, ACLU. Let's get that lawsuit going. Let's shut down these prisons. You know, people have gotten longer prison sentences for minor amounts of drugs than insurrectionists have for
And
attacking the
rapists.
Capitol.
Yep.
Yeah, and rapists that go thousands of test kits just go untested
Yep.
in police stations around the country because they just don't care about that. Ugh.
They keep saying it's a backlog. It's a backlog. It's a
Mm.
backlog. It's like a backlog of
It's
what? Do you
priorities.
need? It's like, do you need to be hiring more laboratory staff to get this shit done? Like,
Mm,
it's like, don't get me wrong. Like, if you like, we have definitely spent a lot of money giving you tools that you say you need for the job,
right.
but those tools have included military gear. Well, if you need some fucking labs in order to get things cleared up, then you need to start putting that in the budget because this is unacceptable.
Yeah, it's a backlog of priorities because we learned when we needed these institutions to test for COVID, boom, we got tons of them. We could do that if we just considered solving rape a priority, but we don't really do that, and we don't really train the officers properly on how to handle a rape victim, and that kind of disgusts me.
Well, and this is where, this is also where I think a fundamental change in policing is where this happens. I mean,
Hmm.
yes, you need the officer there in order to get get the violent offender side of things going,
Right.
but you still have to handle this with some level of tact and not, I
Yeah,
wish I could say more about this in that
we
this
will in an
should be
upcoming
different.
episode. How about that?
Oh, absolutely. There should be there needs to be some fundamental changes, and I think everybody agrees on that.
Hmm.
And but the long story short is that we still need the cops to be dealing with the violent offenders, and we
Yeah.
need the cops to have the tools to process the kits that are going to allow them to catch violent offenders.
Right. But it takes a special kind of person to be able to deal with a rape offender and a victim. Like, I don't think that necessarily is the same mentality. You know what I mean? You could
Mhm,
have different people for that. And they're working on that. Like, even Tallahassee came out with like a more of a mental health um sector that just goes to the crimes. And I like this, you know what I mean?
mhm,
So we're moving that way. We just can't really see it. It's more small towns. Somebody said that if you support community change, you're going to see the effects sooner. And that's
mhm.
kind of cool. So that's what we're going for.
Well, and
I'm
that's
gonna,
exactly it. It has to be done at a community level, and then
mm-hmm.
and the idea that you're going to rely on the feds to create some sort of law that is going to pass down, it's not going to be what you expect it to be.
Yeah,
And
it's not
every
going to be what you
community needs
want.
to handle it differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And you're going to see that, police stations around the country will look at what is working, what isn't working, and they're going to adjust and try their own thing. And what might not necessarily work for one group might work better for another.
that's true. And different, yeah, different communities. I'm going to ask you a quick question really quick because I want to.
I mean,
It has
okay.
nothing to do with anything really special. What is hold on a minute. What is RAM?
RAM, as in
What is
computer RAM.
Yep. What is computer RAM? I want to help people learn more about the basics of computers, and I realized I don't even know what my RAM is.
All right. Okay.
Nice.
Another one I do know.
Nice. Yeah,
RAM
I'm trying.
RAM is it's an acronym for Random Access Memory. Basically, it is you have to think of it like a flash drive on steroids. So whenever your computer runs a process, okay, it's loading up whatever you're working on from your hard drive, and it's storing pieces of it inside of the RAM so that way it can quickly grab it because RAM is insanely fast. Now, in the days of uh, old hard drives, disk hard drives, your hard drive read a lot slower than your RAM did. So by allowing parts of the program to function up inside of the RAM, you were able to take pieces of that program and allow it to operate faster. It's just that from a computing perspective at the time, that solid state memory, that RAM, was way too expensive. Hold on a second.
Gotcha. You're listening to Public Access America on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Google Play. Hey, thank you to Pocket Addict and Victor Reader. I like Victor Reader and Audible, by the way.
Dog and the cat were messing with each other.
That's beautiful. It's a
Uh,
beautiful thought.
so with random access memory, like I was saying,
Mhm.
random access memory, you have very limited memory, but it's very expensive at the time. So by having this super fast memory that you can pull parts of the program from, you're able to function a lot faster. You're able to pull different parts of the programming very quickly in order to get tasks done. Now, as time goes on, hard drives, the disk hard drives get faster, but they come up against limitations. And the solid state RAM gets faster as well as, you figure out newer configurations, more pins, more processing power.
Nice.
So the limitation factor for RAM, for a while was just the RAM, everything else was how fast your hard disk was and how big your processor was. But as you move into the modern computing era, um, you start to see that they're catching up because the technology has gotten more efficient. So, like for example, solid state hard drives are far faster than hard disks are. Even like the first, even more towards like the first generation of SSDs, just because they function like a flash drive on steroids. And the
Ah,
clocks
okay.
and the clock speed of the RAM has increased a ton, but the reality of that has been that you had to have more processors in order to keep up with that speed. Now you have super fast SSDs in the M2 slot. They're called NVMe SSDs. So like between your processor and your hard drive and your RAM, like you get, I wouldn't say it's instantaneous computing power, but it's a lot faster. And the other thing about solid states is that um, they're more reliable in terms of you can move with your computer around. Like people don't tend to think about this with laptops. Like with desktops, you don't think about it at all because you're not moving your desktop around, and those
Sure.
disks are spinning. And if you jar that disk, you're going to gouge it, and then you get bad sectors on your hard drive. Well, because there are no moving parts in an SSD hard drive, you don't have that issue. But with laptops, you see laptop hard drives burn out like after a few years because they're not meant to be moved around the way that they are. People like Mac, I would say Mac users are probably the most egregious. They never shut off their computers because they want to be able to turn it on and have it working instantly. But when it comes to Mac users, I've never met a group of people who have to replace their hard drives more often. And so, like, what I've ended up doing is anytime that I have a friend that needs a new hard drive on a Mac, I tell them to get an SSD. They'll be far happier with it. It'll be far faster, be far more responsive, and you're going to have a lot fewer hard drive issues.
Nice. Okay. I love
But
that.
RAM, random access memory.
Okay. Cool. You lost me there for a little while and I just loved it. I love being buried in ignorance. Like there's information there. I can go back and listen to you like 5, 6, 7 times until it clicks in. And that's what I
Mhm.
that's what I love about podcasting. It's not a conversation you heard on the radio that just sort of disappeared.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you have to think of your hard drive like the book. It's like this is where everything is stored.
Okay.
You have to think of your processor like your brain, and then you have to think of RAM as like this is like my little notebook that I can pull things from really quickly. So instead of having to read the whole book, you go, oh, just need this line. Oh, I just need this. Oh, I just need this.
And that's easier than getting it all or every time you need it, right? So I get
And a
that.
lot faster.
That
A
is
lot
so
faster.
cool. That's so cool. Thank you for that. I was thinking about the internet and like we used to be raised on like education, like remembering, like Dan was talking about. I listened to that episode like 2 or 3 times. Our voices in that podcast are all so soothing. Like I was really happy with that. I know people are tired of COVID, you know what I mean? But
Absolutely.
and I don't care. Anytime I get to have Dan on, because it's a new perspective, and it was a great perspective of examination. But he also said that we are a learn, remember, sort of society, And the
Mhm.
internet kind of changed that because now we have all the answers and we have to choose what we do with that. And some people just stay at the base level of social media because they already know stuff or they don't want to know stuff. There's a lot of people that don't want to know what we talk about, Jeffrey.
Oh, don't I know
You
very
know,
much.
but that made me think of like you mentioned you wanted to talk about food insecurity, right? And to
Mhm.
me, in my big brain, I couldn't wrap my arms around the thought of food insecurity. It's global, it's everywhere. It's it's prone to so many different factors. I didn't even know where to start. And then I realized, I mean, I have this whole note on food insecurity, which I think is so cool. But it made me realize that a lot of people don't do that. When they hear the word food insecurity, they just go, "Yeah, I'm hungry too." And then they go and post another picture on Facebook. You know what I mean?
Well,
So,
and yeah, like it's hard for most people to be able to put their head around certain subjects or certain issues,
mhm,
especially when it's not something that you have to deal with on a daily basis. I mean, if you've never had to deal with, that fear of wondering where your next meal is going to come from, and you don't know anybody who's had to deal with that publicly,
right,
someone who's had to deal with that, I will guarantee you that you know somebody who's had to make those decisions. They may not have told you.
right.
And that's the difference.
There is a short term and a long term version of food insecurity. And I think to myself, people that are actually food insecure, they wouldn't call it food insecurity. They'd be like, I don't have enough, you know? Like they wouldn't have a word to put to it. But food insecurity is a longer sustaining. It's not just like I'm hungry and I'm going to go order something. It's I'm hungry and I don't have the resources, or I'm hungry and I don't have the money. But I wanted to get so just to slow walk other people through my journey of Googling. um, I want to, what is food insecurity? Let's just start with the definition of it. How about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you look at food, what is food insecurity? Food insecurity is the lack of reliable access
Yeah.
to food staples on a daily basis. So the things, just your general need to survive, your general foods that you need to survive, your ability to have 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, dinner. We're not talking about snacks. We're not talking about junk food. I mean, just your ability to eat those 3 meals a day. So everybody has a different idea of what food insecurity looks like, but I would say country by country, what staples are is very different. For some
Right.
countries, rice is that staple. For some countries, bread was that staple. When you look at what food insecurity is, though, it is the lack of reliable access to 3 meals a day.
Right. And that can be anything from being in a food desert to being in an actual desert. You know what I mean?
Yeah, being in a food desert, being in an actual desert, being in poverty,
Hmm.
being homeless,
It's
you know,
yeah, there's a lot of factors, but there's four definitions of well, food security. Two of them are food secure, and then the bottom two are low food security and very low foods, insecurity. And um low food insecurity is just the reduced quality, variety, or desirability of your diet. Like you're getting foods, but they're not foods that are making you any healthier, and you don't, or you might not necessarily like the options you have. But then very low, that is multiple indicators of very disruptive eating patterns.
hmm
And I just, oh, can you
hmm
imagine? And
Can I
okay,
imagine? Yes, I actually can. I
yeah, I
really
bet you
can.
can. You've been on both ends of the spectrum, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
My earliest memories are being very low food secure.
Right. I'm sorry about this note. Most of it is just reading you facts so that other people have them, but we're going to get to the point where you can actually be involved. You know what I mean?
Oh, of
Uh,
course.
So it's important to know that like hunger isn't food insecurity. Food insecurity is something different. So
hmm
if just don't, it's tough because somebody might be food insecure, and you mocking it by saying, you know what food insecurity is because you were hungry once, You don't know who you're saying that to, so be careful.
Right.
Um, so here's some effects that children have from food insecurity, and just stop me if you want to discuss any of them. Increased development risk, right?
Hmm.
Lower physical function,
Hmm.
lower psychological functions,
Hmm.
lower motor development, lower mental development,
Hmm.
lower maternal attachment. Wow, what
Hmm.
do we got here? Hyperactivity.
Hmm.
We got, wow, let's see. Sorry, my screen moved. School absence, that's what it is. Aggression and anxiety.
Hmm.
Um, wow, internalizing disorders. There we go. Externalizing disorders,
So let's
mood
let's
disorders. Okay, go
yeah.
ahead, because they can go on and on, but we're
Oh,
describing America today, aren't
let's
we?
actually let's talk about some of the external ones first. But
Yeah, yeah,
I've
yeah.
got some great points because I want to start with food insecurity in children.
Good, good. Yeah. That's how
Now,
we fix it, right? I'm
yep.
sorry.
So yeah, no, continue with the externals.
Yeah, yeah. That's just that is the external list right there. Um, ab absence and abuse problems. Oh, substance abuse problems,
Mhm.
lack of concentration,
Mhm.
difficulty getting along with people,
Mhm.
suspension from school,
Yep.
and depression and thoughts of suicide. Those are
All
the
right.
physical, those are the outward physical ones. That's the problem, is a lot of those are mental as well as physical, you
Right.
know?
So
Hmm.
let's talk about this in regards to children. There's been some great studies out there. There was one here a couple of years ago where they experimented with giving kids breakfast in places where you typically had, rougher neighborhoods or more kids that were struggling in class. And by feeding kids breakfast and lunch, they found out that children were more attentive during the day. They had fewer behavioral issues. They were more attentive, and their grades actually came up. And somebody had one of somebody I know had said something about, well, how can it be possible that breakfast makes you more attentive? And I'm sitting here going, you're saying this from the perspective of a person who's had breakfast every day of your life,
Hmm.
or at least two meals by choice, not by lack of choice. I mean, I know people who are not breakfast people, don't get me wrong. They're like, wow, do I really have to eat breakfast? And like, for example, the kids, I tell them, look, I know what the study shows. I'm not telling you to go eat a full meal. Sometimes just get something in your stomach, so that way you've got,
Hmm.
you got a little something in your stomach, and you're not, acting up in class. And it's a really great start. To me, when I saw that much change in places where students had more difficulties with school and behavioral issues, it made perfect sense because kids how is it that kids are able to tell you what's going on with themselves when they don't necessarily fully understand what's going wrong?
Right.
This is, like anything else, like your brain does things as a cry for help.
Hmm.
And so when you're dealing with persistent, pervasive hunger and food insecurity, your kids do things, and it's not that, it's weird in that it's a way for kids to cry for help, but it's not the most productive because as adults we're like, well, if you're hungry, just say something. Well,
Right.
if you're used to the idea of not having breakfast in the morning because you can't have breakfast in the morning, how do you tell someone, hey, you know, I'm hungry, but
Hmm.
also I'm used to not having food?
Right. It's not an issue for you. It's the way life is. Somebody that's depressed and considering suicide isn't thinking that food insecurity is a factor. They're thinking that they're a piece of shit and should die.
Exactly. So when it comes, what you've started to see in a lot of schools across the country is that they're also offering breakfast now too, which to me, I think I fully believe should be a requirement. It's
Yeah.
as someone who went to public school and have children that are required to go to public school. It's like, do I think that schools need to be offering breakfast and lunch? Absolutely, I do. I don't have any qualms about it whatsoever, because
Mm-hmm.
you know, by giving children the chance to be um, mentally present, physically able, and spatially aware of what's going on around them, they're going to put themselves into a better position to be successful as adults. Period. End of story. And if that means that, school is providing breakfast to all of those who are, required to be there, which I would say that that's absolutely a requirement, um, because was it you've got truancy laws all over the country where if kids don't show up, they'll, you parents can be arrested or kids can be physically brought into school. Um, Having those resources available to kids, especially young kids. I mean, all kids realistically need to have that resource available to them.
Agree.
And especially when you require them to be at school, especially when you require them to be at school. Like,
I yeah, I think just sensibly, every human is a bag of chemicals, and you need to get that balance right. And in kids, that's tough because they're always in flux with their chemicals. But we do know there's basic chemicals that a bag
mhm,
of chemicals needs to be balanced. And if you
absolutely.
remove those, if you remove zinc or vitamin D, then that bag doesn't work right. And kids are our future. If we think, how are we going to save the world? We have to train the younger generations to
Hmm.
fix it. And we can't do that if they're a bag of chemicals that can't concentrate. And it
You can't.
seems like all of those things are, I bet you 99% of the people listening could say they have a couple of those conditions. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, and it's not to say that, you grew up with food insecurity and that's why you have what you have.
Right.
But what we can say is that when you are food secure, think about it this way. If you're not getting the proper nutrients as a kid, that means that your brain is lacking the proper nutrients to develop. That
Hmm.
means that as you age, some of those things that were going to be part of your developmental structure as a child are either delayed or stopped altogether.
Right.
So the simple act of having food available seems to stem a lot of problems when it comes to future developmental disorders.
Right. Because if you think about some of the things in adults, the overall health status, what do we got? We got obesity here, hypertension, got diabetes, lower cognitive functions, like how
Mhm.
I'm just trying to say cognitive functions. And
Cognitive.
so they become chronic. Those things that we're
Mhm.
seeing in kids, they don't go away as you become an adult. Even if you suddenly get food, some of those things become chronic.
Absolutely. So being able to sit down and understand that a simple change, yes, it has an expense associated with it, but when you think about what happens to those developmental issues,
Hmm.
don't go away. They don't go away once they graduate high school. They turn into different issues, and those
Right.
issues usually are anything from, like you said, substance abuse. That,
Hmm.
guess what, rolls into the whole factor of people being in prison,
Yeah.
you know,
With no hope.
jails being full, no hope, the inability to focus, concentrate. You haven't had that ability. You haven't had the
Right.
resources for your brain to develop those. And so you have chronic issues with employment and homelessness, and those things don't change.
Right. And
Like if you could stop that process at the beginning,
yes, you have to at the beginning.
you could
Otherwise, you're
you could
missing it.
yeah, and will have a greater effect on more people by something as simple as breakfast in the morning.
Hmm. Right. And not just a piece of bread, like
Right.
nutrients, because that's what a bag of chemicals needs.
Right. And so, you've seen this experimented with in a lot of different ways, uh, across the country. The my high school experimented with just having granola bars available for breakfasts in the morning. something because like the kitchen staff was already there and cooking lunch early in the morning.
Mhm.
So it made it difficult, being in a small school to have, eggs and bacon for breakfast.
Sure, and that's
But
kind of heavy. I would fall
right.
asleep in my first class if you gave me eggs and bacon.
Whereas, the way that I grew up, eggs and bacon were a great start to my day.
Sure. Well,
You
yeah,
know,
you had to do work at 4 in the morning on the farm, you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
So for everybody, it's a little bit different, and
Hmm.
and I would even say that, for everybody's body type, it's a little bit different. Like I said, my kids, most of the time they're not really all that much for breakfast. They'll have, some applesauce in the morning, and that's enough to keep them going through lunch.
Hmm.
Sometimes, they wake up hungry, and it's like, all right, we need something with a little more oomph behind it. Okay, great.
Yeah.
And for my kids, having cereal or eggs or um, muffins or applesauce or whatever
Something. Yeah.
available. They have the options, but in places where it's like, okay, do you have the staff available to do like a full breakfast, like eggs and sausage and toast,
Hmm.
or is it granola bars? Is it a bowl of cereal? I mean, granted, it's
What are the
cereal is
kids
like that.
grabbing? If you offer all three and the kids grab the granola, then you back off on the eggs and bacon a little bit. It depends on the kids in your area, right?
Absolutely. It depends on the kids in your area. It depends on, well,
Yeah.
it depends on what their body says they need,
Or
some,
what you have access to, what supplies you have available at a good price,
right,
right?
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And so, for schools, it's all going to be different. You're going to
Mm,
have kids that are like, yeah, no, I only need a little bit. Costco applesauce is the way to
right.
go. Great, fantastic.
But
You know,
kids don't know, right? Like necessarily. They don't know what their body runs best on until they start running on it and then they start choosing it, right?
exactly. But having options available, if it means that, one kid is eating, quick eggs in the morning
Hmm.
at school and they start doing better in school, fantastic.
Right.
If a kid needs a granola bar, if a kid needs an applesauce or a bowl of cereal, whatever, you can
Whatever
have,
helps them best.
right, you can have a ton of quick options available.
Hmm.
Some of them requiring even less, I would say, attendance than others, like, hot breakfast, for example.
Yeah.
Those things right there. And I would also say that we also have to do more in terms of destigmatizing that as well. If somebody
Yeah.
has to come to school early in order to get breakfast, hey, cool, guess what? That
Right.
should, school should be a safe place for kids in
Hmm.
any realm or in any regard.
Yeah.
So,
When we're kids, we're always like, they're not like me. And when we're adults, we're like, thank God they're not like me. So
right.
if you're a kid, just understand that. But I don't think kids understand they're food
No,
insecure. And I think they grow up to be
no.
adults that assume that that's how life is. And they live in a food insecure environment and they raise kids in that. Like they've normalized it.
Until they learn it. And even then, yeah, kids don't understand it,
They don't know
but
they're food insecure, is my
but their
point.
body their body is
Uh-huh.
their body and their mind are causing them to act out in ways that are telltale signs of, hey,
Hmm.
I'm starving, I'm
Right.
hungry.
But my point is the mom that knows food insecurity raising a kid in food insecurity doesn't understand that depression and suicide is attached to the food insecurity. They just think their kid is a bad kid.
Well, and that's where, more conversations around all of these different, like, the brain is a really weird, fickle organ. And,
Of
if you
course.
if you don't do things just right with the brain, it does all sorts of wonky things.
Yeah, if you
I
don't get
say that
enough
as,
water, right?
mhm. If you
Oof.
don't get enough water, if you don't get enough, vitamin D, if you don't get enough vitamin B, if you don't get
Hmm.
enough um, vitamin C, it's your
Yeah.
brain. Your brain does wild and crazy things
Yeah, and in
when.
attempting to compensate for those
Mhm.
deficiencies, right? Sorry.
Yeah,
I'll let you
yeah.
talk. It's just you're just yeah, I love you on this issue, you know.
It's, like I said, this one is one that hits very close to home and it's very close
Hmm.
to my heart. And I would say, you know, when it came to COVID and the shutdowns, this was one of my greatest fears. It wasn't that my
Yes.
kids were going to go hungry; we were going to be fine. But all of the kids that struggled to have access to food, now being forced to stay at home, was
Hmm.
really concerning. You know, that for kids, that one meal a day might be the best meal of the day that they get, or those two meals a day if they got breakfast at school. And so
Right.
when our school district made the decision to start busing meals to kids that needed them and having them pick them up at the bus stop, like that was an absolutely brilliant decision because buses needed to run in order to keep people on staff, and kids needed meals. So it was a fantastic decision that was made to pack up a bunch of meals, like a breakfast and a lunch, and send that off, or have the cafeteria open so that way, during lunchtime parents could bring their kids in and drop them off to get a meal or two. Those are fantastic things that were done, at least here during the pandemic, in order to make sure that kids still had reliable access to food, and that we still kept looking after our community. So my question then becomes, is this something that we can continue on more than just during the school year, because kids still need food during the summers too.
There
So
needs to be more organizations based on that. And I love the destigmatizing of it.
absolutely. It the more we destigmatize it, and the more we get people involved in ensuring that food insecurity is not a prolonged issue, the better off all of our kids are going to be, and the better off we're going to be as a society. Period. End of story.
I talked to Devi about sparks and fires. And I think this is a fire. I don't think this is a spark, you know?
Hmm.
And I think I love getting down to these base reasons why we're messed up because there's simple fixes for all this, right?
Hmm.
And I'm going to say there's a note. I made a big food insecurity note that you can click on in the description portion to learn more. And we are going to probably, let's do this now. Thank you for listening to Public Access America. We are going to go on to part two of food insecurity because it's a important topic and we haven't even gotten to like the thickness of the conversation. So thank you.
Absolutely.
And welcome back to Public Access America. We're going to talk more about food insecurity. There's a note in the description portion of this podcast if you want to learn more and then continue your journey on learning. There is so what are some causes of food insecurity? I'm just going to give you the causes and then we can talk about that. How about that?
Let's do it.
So the first one is income. Pretty self-explanatory, right? If you don't have the money to buy food, you don't have food.
Yep.
Do you have any opinion on? Well, I like the living wage. I think that's where the living wage fits in awfully nicely. You know what I mean?
There's a lot that I can go into on that, but let's put all of it out there for people to kind of understand first.
Okay. Let's see. Next, we have employment. If you don't have a job, you don't have the money, and you can't get what you need. And then there's race and an ethnicity. And let's see. There's disparities that exist in food insecurity. There's studies that say, um, how do I say it? There's certain parts of the country that are 22.5% versus the national average of 12.3%. So
Hmm.
12.3% of our country is food insecure, but yet Black and brown and minority communities are 22.5%. And there's a disparagement there. And then finally, we have disabilities, of course. And that just means if you don't have access to transportation, public or private, and you live away from your supermarkets, you might not be as able to get the food that you need. And those are just some of the quick ones. Is there anything you wanted to highlight?
No, I think so. I want to start with disability first, just because
Sure.
I feel like this is one that actually there's a solution out there, but it
Hmm.
needs to be an equitable solution.
Agreed.
Thanks to the rise of home delivery in the time of COVID,
Right.
the ability for people with disabilities to have food delivered to their house has definitely increased.
It's amazing. Yeah.
But unfortunately, that delivery also comes at a premium.
Yep.
It comes as a premium for everybody, but that's one of those things where I feel like we need to address that a little bit more, a little bit better, and we need to figure out what that solution is.
Mm-hmm.
Is there some type of state delivery system for people with disabilities, for example? So that way you're more able to get the food that you need and without having to struggle with the infrastructure.
Right.
I think that's absolutely possible, plausible, or maybe there's something out there for in terms of
I love this because
starting your own.
I'm sitting here thinking that the private sector is the solution to this, and you're like, maybe there's a governmental thing we could do.
Well, I mean, you think about it, there's a lot of solutions out there in terms of government ability to
Mm-hmm.
deliver things. We look at Medicare, Medicaid all the time,
Right.
and perhaps even in as much as I'm not necessarily a fan of the state route, we already at least have some types of solutions out there that currently exist that might fall under those same infrastructures.
Right. Agreed. Yeah. I think food delivery was nice, but then COVID happened and it became a necessity. And so people got charged the same because it doesn't matter. If you're in the same boat, it's reasonable
No.
accommodation to charge you what I'm charging Jeffrey. And so that made sense to me. DoorDash is charging me what they're charging Jeffrey. But then when people have the ability to actually go and to get the groceries and I don't, then that becomes a disparity. And I think
Mhm.
you need to I it's simple. Instacart just has to give a discount to disabled people. That's basically all it is acknowledge that we are paying a premium for the items. Publix charges $1 more sometimes per item when you get it delivered, and then the delivery cost, and then the tip, and then the taxes. And so there's a way that maybe the states or Fed could subsidize that. You know what I mean? That would be nice in the Build Back Better plan.
And I mean, even like, because that's the trouble with the private sector in this regard is that you would have to rely on you'd have to have a service where, number one, they would make it very clear from the beginning that they would be, people with disabilities would not be charged for delivery fees and all of that,
Or
and
as
that,
much. I'm willing to discuss it. I don't want
and
freebies,
yeah,
but
but that your normal everyday buyer is going to be the one that subsidizes that through
mm-hmm.
increased delivery charges and costs.
Sure. Sure.
So that's where you see a significant issue there is that people are going to migrate to other sources where their delivery costs are going to be lower and they're not going to be subsidizing. I mean, we see that in the private market all the time anyways. So
Of course.
as someone who's very much in favor of private market, that's just a reality that we have to face. um but when it comes to when it comes to social benefits, when it comes to things like Medicare, Medicaid, we already have existing structures in place,
Yeah.
payment structures in place, and so this is where, and especially if you're going to be giving any type of discount or zero cost delivery service, like, it's going to have to be documented somewhere that
Yeah.
this is an option for you.
Right. Maybe in Medicare. Maybe it should be something that Medicare offers, food delivery.
So
Man,
so there's, I'd say that there's possibility there, but it's definitely something that's got to be very, very well thought out.
agreed. Yeah. Bigger minds than ours.
Dog is being a jerk today.
I
Lay
gotcha.
down.
Gotcha. Just worried. I thought it was Devi. Happy birthday, Devi.
Yeah, no, if I was snapping at Debbie and telling Debbie to lay down, I'm probably going to die.
Or you wouldn't be live streaming it.
Hey, today on Public Access America, we're going to be live streaming Jeffrey's murder because
That's
he's being an
funny.
asshole.
So
No,
so unemployment and lack of money, those two kind of go together, right? And those are fairly
unemployment, lack of money. Let's see here. Substance abuse is another one that I would throw in there.
hmm
Those are ones that I'm familiar with personally. So let's think about this a little bit.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
when it you know when it comes down to it, we know that lack of money means that you're not going to be able to find food, but you have to find what the root cause of that lack of income is.
Yeah.
Is it substance abuse? Is it unemployment? Is it um
Hmm.
I would say an inability to stay employed? That's one that I've seen frequently.
And you,
You know,
you grew up food insecure. There's a good chance that you're not going to be able to stay employed like a normal person with nutrients.
and that's absolutely the case. Is that anytime that you run into the lack of income, you have to start digging into why is there a lack of income.
Right.
Lack of income just means that you can't buy food, but what causes that lack of income? Lack of a
Hmm.
living wage, for example. That definitely is one of the reasons why you might not be able to. And I think we got to address this in the same token, at the same time, as this idea of quote unquote starter jobs, like bagging groceries, checking people out,
Hmm.
stocking shelves. Let me guarantee you one thing really fucking quick is that if you didn't have people stocking your grocery store shelves, and you would find chaos happen really quickly. So the idea
Right.
that this is a quote unquote starter job is entirely bullshit.
Yep. I totally agree.
So
Okay.
let's enough with the starter jobs thing. Let's get that out of the way.
Yeah. You can have
Because
four
what do you
starter jobs and still not make enough. Disney employees are on Medicare and homeless. I mean, because they're getting these base jobs, so it's an
I mean, for
issue.
the longest time, Walmart used to tell people how to apply for benefits because they didn't pay enough.
Right. Thank
I
God they
mean,
are starting to, though.
yeah. So I mean, that's a really fucking crazy concept in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, uh, the idea that somebody can work full time and not be able to afford food is absolutely insane, and that stuff's got to go.
Yeah. And that's a whole nother discussion for a whole nother time.
Absolutely.
I will say, so the national average for food insecurity is 12.3%. But if
Hmm.
you drag that down and just examine low income housing or low income households, you're going to find a 31.5% um, of those homes are food insecure. And like I said, they don't even know it. And people, I want to get to the racial disparity because there's some reasons for that. And I think people don't understand. Maybe, oh, race, black people are lazy, or immigrants, they just don't. I don't know what people say, but there is a reason that some of these urban areas, including disabled people, by the way, poor people, disabled people, minorities stuck in urban environments, they face something called a food desert. And we've talked about that before, but do you want to
Hmm.
describe like what a food desert is to you?
So food desert is essentially it's an area in which you have to travel excessively, even sometimes to your own detriment, in order to be able to buy food. So that could be anything from having to travel an hour by bus in order to get to a grocery store and come back, and having certain circumstances that keep you from being able to uh, get to a grocery store, get to food. A lot of the times it's simply that, you know, uh, grocery stores get closed in certain areas because they're not as profitable as other stores, or
Hmm.
they, you know, they there's a lot of reasons why they might
Yeah.
close a grocery store. Most of the time, it has to deal with the fact that you might have a bigger grocery store that's nearby and it's cutting into the sales in those. So
Or they
you,
just don't want to build there. I mean, in
or they don't want to
Chicago,
build there.
most of the grocery stores just did not want to build within Chicago because everything, the price for everything, for security, for maintenance, for taxes, for regulations to be solved and stuff like that was just so expensive that they didn't
Hmm.
want to go into an urban area and deal with all that and then watch their business just be run down. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Absolutely. And especially like especially in, I would say, high crime areas, that makes it a lot more difficult to keep a functioning grocery store open
Right.
when
Right.
especially when you have all of those taxes and um, costs of keeping the store open on top of
Right.
what you're most likely going to be dealing with in theft. I mean,
God, isn't that a catch 22?
all grocery stores have a certain amount of theft built into their budget and what that
Mm-hmm.
looks like. Because, I mean, that is a reality. Um, for most businesses is that you have to have a certain amount of theft built into your costs,
Right.
and especially grocery stores. Because think about it, if you're hungry and you need to survive, what are you going to do?
Yeah, if you're unemployed and you don't have money and you still need to get food to survive, what are you gonna do?
And I mean, if you still need to get food to survive, or your kids need food to survive, what are you going to do?
What are you gonna, yeah, yeah.
And that's the other thing too, is that in places where there's a lack of good economic opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
you see an increased crime rate. Why is that?
Food insecurity just explained that to us, right?
Well, not that's part of it, but what part of the human condition do we know real well? We'll do whatever it takes to earn money. And
Mm.
so, unfortunately, you start to see some of the less above ground operations.
Ah, okay. The drug
Drug
war.
running. Yep. Drug running's a big one.
Mm,
And so, this is where taking a step back and publicly acknowledging that, guess what, the drug war didn't work.
right.
And in places where you've started to see legalized pot, for example, you've seen a significant decrease in crime. Why? Well, number one, you're not arresting people for having pot, so there's that. If it's not illegal to have, you're not going to get arrested for it. But number two, you've now created these pot businesses that stood up
Hmm.
seemingly overnight. It's not that they weren't operating before. They were operating just fine before.
Yeah,
It's
just
just that
taking advantage of people.
now they can work above ground and be tax paying businesses, but they still don't have access to banking. They still don't have
Right.
access to any of the normal things that a person would have access to. I'd like to thank the feds for continuing to fuck that one up. So Joe Biden, fuck you, get this fixed.
Yo, that
If
trips
you
me out.
seriously, and that's the thing, is like there was a really funny report that came out that Mexicans are preferring American weed over the cartel's weed
Hmm.
because it's better quality and it's got cooler names.
Yeah. Oh, wow, cooler names. I was just
Yeah,
thinking, the U.S. Marijuana has no mercury in it. You know
there's
what
that
I
too.
mean?
Well, and think about it, like, if you've got a better quality, more predictable product, and it's not just, whatever you can happen to get your hands on,
Hmm.
that's the glory of being where you are, in the United States. If it's legal, is that you have a consistent product,
Right.
and that product is held to a consistent standard. But going back, you don't have people getting arrested for having weed, number one. Number two, you now have more legalized businesses, tax paying businesses,
Locally tax paying, not federally.
locally tax paying businesses, and federally tax paying, because it's still, you have federal income tax on it, believe it or not.
Wow. How do you pay that?
Same way you pay any federal income tax,
Hmm.
is, if you have a business, it gets charged at a specific rate. You don't have access to banking, which is royally screwed.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. How do you pay for your federal taxes when you don't have access to banking? You know what I mean? It's just weird.
Yeah, well,
Somebody
that's the
figured
U.S.
it out though.
government. Well, the answer is that it's got to be legalized, so
Of
that
course
way
it
all
does.
of these businesses can be, full in the light, fully regulated, tax-paying businesses. Look, let the
Hmm.
states figure out if they want to have legalized pot as a part of their business. Great, fine, whatever. You still have dry counties in different states,
Hmm.
but the reality is that there is no rhyme or reason for this to continue. And quite frankly, the fact that the Republicans and the Democrats are refusing to end this war on this is just very telling.
Yeah, they want the funding to fight it so they can move it to other things. I just think marijuana used to be legal. They used to sell stamps to produce it, like
Hmm.
tax stamps, they call them. And all
Hmm.
you have to do is just do that again. It, you
Hmm.
never illegalized, you don't need to legalize it. It was already legal. All you have to do is start the stamp production thing again and hand it out to growers all over the country, and then you're going to get the taxes for it. We have a system in place already. So let's just bring that back.
Absolutely. And
It's just that
there's,
easy. I don't think they want to give us rights. You know what I mean?
oh,
They just,
absolutely. Well,
they
I
like
mean, you think
taking
about it.
them. They don't like
You,
giving them.
I mean, the CIA has used the drug war to sell their own drugs for God knows how many years, and that's
Mm-hmm.
that's something that we've actually known.
Yeah.
And so the reality is that the decisions that are being made are being made to harm Americans and keep people in jail, keep
Mm.
people from being productive tax-paying citizens, and it's bullshit. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm I'm not saying that I like the idea of them being tax-paying citizens because I like the idea of them paying taxes. Fuck the feds. They've had their chance to
Right.
make this happen, but at the same time, it's what else, if you want to talk about funding healthcare, for example, or funding part of the infrastructure package,
Mm.
this needs to be part of the deal, is that marijuana gets legalized and the tax revenue created off of this helps supply infrastructure, period, end of story.
Yeah. Food insecurity. You could fight in food insecurity just with that.
You fight you food insecurity with it very easily.
And you should, because you're giving people the munchies anyway. You should. You
It's
should.
true, it's true.
So some of these food deserts, they don't actually have grocery stores. They have convenience stores, bodegas, things like
Yep.
that. And they offer less nutrition at a higher price.
Yep.
And that's just weird to me. Like, to pay full premium price to be poor and have to pay full premium price for that can of green beans. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? 250, $3 for a can of green beans in the city where it's 59 cents in the suburbs, you know?
Hmm.
Why are you profiteering from people that can least afford it?
That's yet another one of the grand questions, and it just has to do with the fact that because they can,
Because
and
they can't,
until
because they have to.
yeah, and until people either A, build grocery stores, or B, more delivery becomes available,
Mm,
to places further out. I think delivery is going to be the thing that changes that uh calculation for a lot of people, because like you said, if you're paying extra money for that can of green beans, and um when you look at what that costs you, you know what at what point does, and I would say this is where your math comes in, at what point does your delivery cost become
balance it out, right?
become less than your cost of buying at the convenience store or the bodega?
That's right. Because I pay for my delivery monthly. Nine ninety nine a month for my delivery. I get anything over $35 delivered for free. But what I do is I shop the sales, the 2 for 1s, the half offs, and then at the end end up saving $60. Whereas if I go to the store, I can't see the prices and I just grab things and end up spending more. So delivery helps me um, maintain the prices I can spend. You know what I mean? So for me, it's a benefit to, even if I pay more for the products, I'm saving 3 times as much. So for me, it works out mathematically that way.
Absolutely. And realistically, it's just one of those things where until you sit down and you figure out what your expenditures are,
Hmm.
and then try and figure out with delivery costs, all of that associated with, are you able to, basically buy yourself a better standard of living in a food desert until they get you a grocery store out there, and maybe that's exactly what needs to happen for, companies that are relying on data like Safeway, like Albertsons, like whatever you might have in your area, Kroger, for example. Um, you
Any
know,
of those.
it's yeah, I mean there's a few big ones out
Yeah, I know
there,
what you mean
uh,
though.
but Publix or whatever, you know, it's being able to figure out what your costs are shopping in one spot versus getting delivery from another, you know, if
Hmm.
they deliver out as far as you do. And
Yeah.
I think that that's like one of the biggest changes. Now, we can definitely have a discussion if they're not willing to send uh trucks to your area.
Right.
It becomes a much different conversation, yeah.
That is a thing. Yeah, that is a thing. I've lived in communities where the pizza guy wouldn't deliver, you know?
Hmm. Nope.
Okay, that's
So
interesting.
so there's nothing about it that's ideal in any stretch
Right.
of the imagination, you know. But at the
Mm,
same time too, if technology has made it easier and made it more affordable than it already is,
yeah.
then you know it's time to figure out, hey, what can we do to make this more efficient and more effective.
Yeah. I like the Victory Garden. Remember those?
Oh, victory gardens
Everybody,
were fantastic.
I think, yeah, I mean, I grew up in an age where I was visiting aunts and uncles that had, postage stamp sized yards, and their yards were just 3 levels of Victory Garden, and you could just
Hmm.
walk through there and grab anything you wanted. I think that helps to supplement. If you have all the vegetables there, then you can afford more meat, and then you have a balanced diet, you know?
Yep.
So you can even get potatoes. You can get your starches and carbs right there.
And that's where, you know, and that's, but part of that calculation has to be, what does it look like for apartment living these days?
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I grew tomatoes on my balcony a couple of years in a row. There
Mm,
was one year though, holy crap. Like I had more tomatoes than I knew what to do with. More cherry
right.
tomatoes. It was insane.
But then you just
And
find the co-op, the empty lot that you can co-op into a Victory Garden spot
mhm,
for many people, you know?
yep. Yeah, and unfortunately, like right now, I'm dealing with the fact that, you know, part of my yard is blocked out by trees that are just, yeah, I honestly think about half of them need to be cut down because they're a little sketchy.
Yeah,
And
welcome to
so
Washington State.
if I had those trees down, I would have more sunlight to be able to grow gardens. So,
Sure, sure, sure. I mean, you have to deal with the situations you have. Like we talked about the 3D gardens. If you have a bunch of
mm,
rundown buildings in your neighborhood, maybe start a co-op that way. If you, if you're growing, if somebody, I lived on a dead end and somebody was growing kale and lettuce and beets and stuff, and I was growing raspberries and strawberries and blueberries, and we had an apple tree, and the neighbor next door, he was making Polish sausages and stuff, and then we would just all get together and trade, and I thought that was so nice. I wished other people could do that.
oh, absolutely. And I think that there's still I think that there's still a realm for that. And to be honest, you see it a little bit more in rural communities than you do in urban communities anymore.
Right.
And I think it's fantastic. And I mean, I believe that it's a practice that needs to come back,
Yeah,
you know,
that could
because
actually unite the urban and the rural communities, because that seems to be where the divide is in America today.
oh, could you imagine if you had a bunch of urban communities that were able to grow a bunch of porch vegetables, and then,
Yeah.
you know, your rural communities that had your eggs and your meats and a few other things,
Hmm.
larger crops, you know, and y'all just show up, you know, once a month to trade out some stuff.
That,
Fantastic.
that's an awesome idea. And there is though that's happening in Missouri, that's happening in places on the front lines of food insecurity. I mean, it's
Mhm.
so simple to just get rid of a food desert. It takes one building to get rid of a food desert, you know?
It takes one building and a community of willpower in order to do it. And I would argue that it takes, I would take a city council to be able to allow for that to
Hmm.
happen.
Hmm.
Because a lot of these places, they're not going to be regulated to do that. And I think that's crap, especially if they're complaining about, you know, food insecurities and food deserts. You know,
Right.
you're going to have to do, you got to do what you have to in order to make this problem, I wouldn't say disappear, but minimize it.
It it could disappear. I
It
mean,
could, it
it
could.
could, but it's not, I mean, it's gonna take every it takes at least half the amount of time to fix as it does to break it, you know? And I think to myself that the crime in these communities, because of the food insecurity, could be eliminated if you just get them on a track of having the right foods. You know what I mean? Even I can see just having a bag of vegetables to hand out when somebody comes by and says I can't afford food. Because Publix will do that. If you walk into Publix and say I'm homeless, I have no money for food, they will give you food. You know what I mean? And I think there's some amazing things there. I think they don't get promoted as well as other things get promoted, but there is people working on it. I just think we need to let people know it exists. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And as people find out that, these offers exist, and as people
Hmm.
find out that, corporations do certain things in order to encourage you know, food availability, we've gotta do everything we can to call that out.
And I don't know if you can use like food stamps to get delivery. I got to look into that.
That would be an interesting one, is if you could use food stamps to get delivery.
Right.
I think
People
I
look
think
down on food stamps. I thought they were just pretty awesome. My mom got them, you know what I mean? And it was like, oh, thank God we get to eat today.
Well, I think people look down on food stamps because, they're not they had breakfast, so, hunger doesn't exist.
Hmm.
And also too, like, the number of things that you can get on food stamps definitely does not look like what you would expect it to look like.
Yeah, no, you can't get alcohol. You can't get paper, toiletries, anything like that. It's just food you can get.
Hmm. And a lot of and at least, my experience with it, it definitely wasn't always the food you wanted, but it worked.
We used to get a we used to get the like 10-pound brick of American cheese. It, I don't know, like I got so sick of cheese.
Oh man, I remember, one of the things that we could get at the time was apple cinnamon Cheerios.
Wow.
And I was like, yeah, this is the stuff right here. No more regular Cheerios. But there's also some things that we had a lot of because, that was what we got. And it was,
Right.
we had a lot of tuna noodle casserole and we had a lot of goulash. And those are two things that to this day, I still can't eat.
Mm-mm.
And
No,
it's sad because, like, when Devi makes it, it smells great. It smells
mhm.
absolutely fantastic. Like, I want to have it. But the moment I put it in my mouth, it's like I can't do it. I cannot do it to this day.
Yeah.
And I know that it's a psychological block. I know that because I
Mhm.
like the taste of it, but it's just like I can't do it.
It's your body saying I don't want to go back there. You know what
Right.
I mean? Yeah.
Which is really unfortunate because it is so good. And I get why my mom made it, is because it was so cheap. It was
Right.
what we could get. And I don't fault my mom for that at all. Like, I get it. Like, we
Hmm.
did what we had to do in order to survive. I just
Thank you,
can't eat
ma'am.
those things. Exactly. Thank you, mom.
Yeah. I
Thank you.
had a mother-in-law that grew up in the Depression, and I asked her, I was like, why do we have pork every night? And she said, I grew up in the Depression, and the only thing you could get was ground beef, and now I just don't want ground beef. I don't want to go back there. And I was like, that makes sense. Thank you. I'll enjoy my pork now.
Right. You know, and that's just it. Is like I still like I love tuna fish sandwiches. I love um I love a lot of different noodle dishes with ground beef in it. Mac and cheese with ground beef and sautéed onions, fantastic. Love it. It's absolutely delicious. But goulash and at least my mom's version of goulash and tuna noodle casserole, can't do it. Won't
Can't
be
do
able to.
tuna noodle casserole. I'm sorry. I've had it before. It's
Ah,
just too wet. Like,
see,
nobody
but
takes the
I
time to
mean,
drain their tuna fish right, you know?
oh yeah. Well, you got to drain your tuna fish, right? If you don't do that, then it's just terrible, no matter what tuna fish dish you make.
Exactly. Don't use that water to like boil the noodles in your casserole.
Oh
It's
Christ.
disgusting. Yeah.
Oh fuck. Yeah. Yep. Plus, nuking tuna noodle casserole the next day is uh
Mm, yeah.
the smell.
I understand.
Random topic for you.
Yeah,
So
we're done. I'm at the end of the list for in food insecurity. People can go and read the note and discuss it themselves from this point on.
So when hiring practices, when they do interviews, they'll ask you a series of questions. So in one of my previous jobs I worked for, we got to ask our own questions. Like we got to come up with some questions that we wanted to ask, to try and figure out who was going to work with the company and who was going to work best with you.
Mm.
So, some people would come up with, questions around like, how do you handle this pressure, or what would you do in this case? Because I can't take anything seriously ever, I came up with, is it acceptable to microwave fish in the workplace? The funny thing about that question is it threw people off. Like you get this idea. It's like, oh well, in this case, in this particular
Yeah.
scenario, I would handle it like this. And oh well, if I had an employee doing this, it would be, is it acceptable to microwave fish? And people literally, like, it stopped them in their tracks. They're like, wait, what? Like, and every single one of them, like, is this a real question? Is this a real question?
I would say the answer is no.
And that was the funny thing, is between all the candidates, we got different answers every single time. And it forced them to sit down and go, huh. So like one candidate was like, absolutely not, no way, zero
Mhm.
chance. It is not
Right.
acceptable. We had another candidate who was like, yeah, because there's a lot of great dishes out there that you can make with fish, and when you microwave it, it doesn't smell terrible. And then we had another candidate go, well, you've got the cultural aspect of things that you have to keep in mind, because some cultures eat a lot of fish, and that needs to be something that you take into account. And another one was like, I think it just depends on the dish, really. And so it was just weird because it threw everybody off. Like it actually showed us who people really were
That's
in their
awesome.
ability to either be iron fisted or diplomatic.
I lived
And it
in a
was,
household with a child allergic to fish. Like she couldn't go in the fridge where fish was wrapped. So I would say no, just based on the employees. I think it depends on the employees, but if there's somebody with an allergy, then I don't think you can.
yeah, it was just wild. Like I know it's a totally random aside, but
No, it's cool.
it just thought about that. Figuring out who people are, it's a lot of fun.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like leaving peanut butter on everybody's desk. You're gonna kill somebody at some point.
It's true. Or the dog will come and lick up your desk, at least in the case of
Uh,
Billy, anyways.
yeah, don't shit on my dick. Sorry. I don't know where that came from. Peanut butter.
Peanut butter.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome, Jeffrey. So we did an episode on inspirations beyond disabilities Friday. They wanted to do all things movies, and it was just amazing. Do you watch? I know you don't watch many movies per se. You know what I mean?
I watch more movies than I do like regular TV. So
Okay.
like movies, like I enjoy movies. I just don't like watch normal like TV shows. Like to me, it's most of them are like network television. It's boring. It's tried. It's ugh.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like I actually just watched Squid Game with the kids.
Shit, they were just talking about Squid Game. What do you think of the dubs?
Oh God, that was terrible. Well, I mean, the dubs in the English are, oh man, it's wow. Netflix, bro, we need to talk. What the fuck did you do?
Right. Somebody, that's what Jay said. Jay's wife watched it and he had to listen to it. And then he said by like the third season or so, like the plot takes over and you don't notice the bad dubs as much because you're more into the story. So good luck with that.
Yeah, ooh wee, that was. I mean, I don't know what the fuck Netflix was on there, but god damn, that was terrible.
Right. So
Yeah,
do you have an DC Marvel opinion?
I really don't.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily a fan of one or the other.
Okay. See, I'm
Yeah.
lucky to where I'm untethered from the comic books, so I can enjoy a movie for the movie, you know?
Right.
Everybody said Justice League was bad, and I was like, I don't care. It's just another action movie I can lay in bed and watch, you know?
Right, right. And for some of them, it's like, okay, yep, superhero movie, great. Like for me, they were a novel. Like they were a
Hmm.
novelty. Like I remember when the first, X-Men came out when I was in high school,
Right,
and it was like mind blowing for the time. And then it was just nothing but superhero movies. Not to me, it lost its novelty.
right,
So that was really tough because I enjoyed some of them, but then when they were like coming out every single year, I think for me, Deadpool broke that monotony of it. So like that was
right.
fun because to me it was like, oh my God, all right, here we go. Superhero movie, something hard's gonna happen, bad choices are
Mhm.
gonna be made, better choices will eventually be made. Superhero becomes victorious. Yay!
Hell yeah.
Like, all right, now we're just gonna rinse, repeat ad nauseum.
Yep.
Whereas then you get Deadpool who's like, yeah, fuck it, we're gonna go for chaos.
Right. It had the same plot points as every other movie, but yet it had new plot points. And by the way, he probably got the hottest girlfriend of the superheroes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Him and Hawkeye. Why did basic Hawkeye get such a great girl? You know?
Who knows?
That Hawkeye's wife, by the way, is Mabel from Gravity Falls and Louise from Bob's Burgers. And so I can crush on Louise knowing that she's of legal age. Yeah.
uh,
But I like that. I like that
that's
actress. You know what I
funny.
mean? It
Yeah.
is funny. She's hilarious. You know what I mean?
Oh, she's hysterical.
But yeah, I get it.
So
And
like,
how do you watch Disney at all?
not really. I
Yeah,
mean,
no, me neither.
like for me, like I grew up at the heyday of like the Disney animations, like with
Mhm.
Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin and Lion King, like
Wow.
those blockbusters right there, and the Little Mermaid, like that
Hmm.
that group of blockbusters right there.
Wow. Okay. I grew up with
So,
Fantasia and Robin Hood,
well,
Alice in
I had
Wonderland,
those. I had those too, and those were fantastic as well.
Yeah.
You had the classics, but like those, 90s, early 90s blockbuster heydays,
Hmm.
like those were fantastic.
I love it. I
And
was telling,
it just doesn't feel the same now that it's
mm-mm.
all moved towards 3D animation.
Yeah. No, I totally get that.
So,
I was telling my friend that they were talking so much about Disney, and I was like, the problem is the social advocate in me wants to tell these people that love Disney so much that 33% of their employees are homeless and on Medicaid because Disney doesn't pay enough. But yay, let's go. And she's like, you're just a downer. And I was like, well, I didn't say it. I let them have their conversation.
yeah, it's well, and then especially now, like where they're just rehashing everything as a live action.
Right.
It's like, I mean, don't get me wrong, like I think that there's a place for it, and
Mm,
I thought the live action Beauty and the Beast was really well done. I didn't see the Aladdin one,
mm.
but for me that one was going to be a hard one because the genie was Robin Williams to me.
Exactly.
And I know that it probably isn't culturally, well, it definitely wasn't culturally correct in any stretch of the imagination, but the genie was a cartoon and Robin Williams was a human cartoon. It just worked.
Hmm. That's the role he was meant to play.
Yep.
Yeah. I think that's hilarious. Do you think that character was gay?
What character?
Robin Williams, Genie.
Do I think it was? Nah.
Sorry, somebody asked me if there was LGBT characters in Disney, and I was like, that's immediately I thought of Robin Williams. Not that I thought he was gay or straight, but that he was flamboyant enough to pull off a character.
I think it's a tough one in that I don't
Yeah,
necessarily know that there's a right answer to that.
I
It's
don't
kind of
think
like
a
it's kind of
cartoon
like
genie is going to stick his penis in anything. So I think it's a characterization of something.
well, and I mean it's like the Bert and Ernie discussion, whether Bert and Ernie are gay. or are they
Right.
best friends? Or, I think that for some people it makes sense for them to, what do the kids call kids call it head canon,
Mm-hmm.
them
Fun to talk
as,
about at the end of a show when you're out of topics.
yeah, I think it's they call it head canon, where you can think of a character as a certain way, or something like that. I can't speak to it in any way, shape, or form. Sesame Street has said that, they're best friends,
Mm-hmm.
and some have said that, well, they have to say that because gay on TV is bad, and all of this other stuff. And it's like, I
Was.
don't know. I don't know what the right answer to this is, and I think that's unfortunately not one that I get to speak
Okay. It's just a fun thought to think
on.
of LGBT characters in Disney. It's just something you can waste your head time on.
Well, and I mean, like, once again, not exactly best topic for me to speak on either, because I don't
Mhm.
know, like, I don't really know when kids start to show interest in, what their sexuality looks like, and at what point do you really have that conversation? I know that we've been very open and honest about that in this household, and everybody has their own opinions on it. I mean, open and honesty definitely leads to, I would say, far fewer issues down the road, personally, and from
Uh,
experience growing up Catholic.
I,
But at what point do you start those conversations? I honestly don't know. Like, that's definitely not something that I've ever had to think about.
well, then think about it this way: Bert and Ernie were written a long time ago by people that were older than Bert and Ernie, right? And in that time, there was flop houses, and there was people lived. I mean, they were poor. They were poor AF, and so you might get a group of men sleeping in one bedroom. You know what I mean? It wasn't unheard of to have a roommate like that, like the Odd Couple or
Hmm.
something like that. And there was that, and it doesn't necessarily imply sexuality. Just
Right.
economic status more.
Well, I mean, even like, for example, like you look at Star Trek, for example, and George Takei, you know, Gene Roddenberry had, made it very clear that, Star Trek was a very progressive universe, but back in those days, gay on TV was not a thing, and it would
Right,
never be a thing. And so it's really hard, especially when you look at historical context. Like, I understand why people would think Bert and Ernie might be gay, because back when, Sesame Street was created, there was no gay on TV.
right. Well,
And so,
there was, but it had to be subtle. Like it was the
well,
same dog whistles, right?
it wasn't, but that's the thing, is it wasn't just subtle, it was evil.
Well, it could have been portrayed as evil, but what I'm saying is gay characters found their ways to get their messages out. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
But they were always still the butt of the joke. They were
Uh-huh.
never the hero. and that's the
Right.
and that's the difference, is that, you know there might have been gay on TV in very select circumstances, but they were never the good guy.
No.
They were never the hero. They were always the butt
Right.
of the joke, or some villain of some sort.
Yeah. Well,
And so, like,
yeah.
gay on TV, historically speaking, you know, I mean, I would say Gene Roddenberry definitely did his best to try and undermine it a little bit.
Hmm.
Uh, but there wasn't a whole lot you could do back in those days, and he
Hmm.
had to play within those frameworks.
There was there was a rash of when HIV was really big, there was a rash of really tough guys dying of AIDS and coming out at the end as gay. And
Hmm.
yeah, I think about that. There was like Rock Hudson, right? There was a lot of gay, he just didn't know it. And it was like
Oh, there was a
amazing.
ton of gay.
But what kills me is that people had to live that life of hiding. You know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
and I think about today and how people don't have to hide. I mean, depending if you're in a super red conservative area, you still have to hide, but you can have the ability to find a better life if you choose to. It's a different if it's a different frog boiling. Life is
Hmm.
getting better, just not fast enough, and new people keep coming in and saying, here's the disparity, where other people lived with that, other people lived with segregation, and then a generation came along and said, I don't want to do that, and it changed, but then
Mhm,
the next people grew up and they were like, well, I don't like this, I don't like the poverty line or redlining. And I love it,
mhm.
we're constantly moving because we have new people to fight the causes.
Well, and especially as even some of the conservative folks wake up to the fact that some of these old ideals don't make any sense anymore.
Right.
It's like I know that people grew up a certain way, but at some point you start to go, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Like whether or not, some of them will admit it openly, there's a group of conservatives out there that believe climate change to be real, and that,
Mhm.
if we don't address it head on, we're going to lend ourselves not only to, climate doom, but
Right.
we're going to be behind other countries in having options to sell to the rest of the world. So, I'll take what I can get.
Yep. I just watched Kingsman. Did you like that movie, Kingsman? And Samuel L. Jackson was probably the best bad guy. And he was like, "You already know what I know, don't you?" And the other guy's like, "Yeah, that carbon is red herring, and we are already past the point of no return." And I was like, "God damn it, we are, aren't we? We're already past the point of no return,
Yeah, probably.
probably. But it won't be
But
our problems. Maybe your problem, not mine. I'll be dead by then. But maybe you'll have to deal with it."
or maybe a giant meteor will hit Earth and none of us will have to deal with it, or a giant volcano will erupt and, well, half the Earth will be an icicle.
Wow, we just had a her we just had a volcano erupt.
Mhm. We've had several volcanoes erupt.
Isn't that weird? And right now today, NASA NASA is crashing a satellite into an asteroid at
Hmm.
15,000 miles an hour just to see if it'll move the asteroid at all.
Change its trajectory. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe you need to redesign a satellite. Why are we taking these high um these components and just throwing them at a rock?
I mean, to me, it would make more sense that you basically, land a thruster onto
Yep.
a rock to change its trajectory. But I'm not an astrophysicist, so
Yeah,
I
no,
can't say
totally.
that I can't say that the idea would work. You
Right.
know, or do you have to create an explosion and funnel it in such a way that it'll give the asteroid a different trajectory?
Right.
I mean, I know a little bit about astrophysics, but I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination.
I think they're throwing a satellite at it because that's what they had to throw. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like
Throwing a It's
they
like
didn't
throwing
have
a piece of paper at your sibling when they're pissed at you and going to hit you.
right. Yeah.
This isn't going to work the way that I wanted.
We didn't design the satellite with a big boxing glove on it yet, so we're just gonna throw this
Boing.
satellite at it until we build one.
Yeah,
I
I
think
don't know
that's
how well that's
amazing.
going to work. Be
Yeah, I
interesting
don't
to find
know.
out.
It doesn't take much to alter the course of a rock, you know?
Well, I mean, especially in a vacuum, it shouldn't take a whole lot. And
Hmm.
maybe that's the answer is that, what can we build on the cheap to hit the target and knock it off course just enough?
Yeah. So it could be an old satellite. Jeffrey, I don't know if you know anything about it. I'm waiting on my astrologer to tell me about it. Mercury is in retrograde, and it has been killing me for about 2 weeks. And everybody's talking about it, but nobody's telling me when it's supposed to end? Have you
Uh,
felt the effects of Mercury in retrograde?
well, I mean, funny enough, I would say that there have been some times where I've had some pretty major computer issues happen in
Mhm.
different corporations, and it's happened during quote unquote Mercury in retrograde. But this is also probably one of those things that, from a statistical standpoint, if I were to actually look at the issues that I face and when they happen,
Yeah.
it's probably subjective bias. It's like, of course, Mercury in retrograde,
Ooh,
everything's going to shit right now. It's kind of like how you always feel like you get the craziest calls on a full moon.
right. Okay, because that's when you're looking for them.
Probably, that's when you're expecting things to go haywire, and then something actually goes haywire, and you're like, "Hey, confirmation bias, yay!"
Wow.
Probably is what the case is, but because I can guarantee you, I've had plenty of computer fuckery happen in non-retrograde.
Well, let me ask you about something that did happen during Mercury in retrograde, and that is Facebook going offline. Do you know what happened? Yay!
Oh, Facebook going offline. Yeah, so supposedly Facebook went offline because they had a configuration error in their server and it knocked it offline for a full day, which I find really interesting because Facebook's servers should be a system of redundancies. So the idea that all of their servers would have gotten the same upgrade at the same time and gone offline just seems a little suspicious to me. I'm not saying that from a conspiracy theory standpoint. I'm saying that as somebody who has experience with servers. Typically what ends up happening is you upgrade a server and then you deploy that server and everybody starts testing out that configuration and working in it. And then you add more people into that server and you keep testing that configuration. And you don't usually go full upgrade into all of these configurations just to see what happens. So the idea that all of Facebook's servers had the same configuration error just is a little strange to me.
Me too. I thought it was a pouting event.
Oh, probably.
Mm, yeah, because they just had that testimony from the whistleblower, and I think Mark Zuckerberg was like, "Fine, you want to see the world without Facebook?" And he just did something. But they're
And
saying
cost
it's
himself $7 billion.
is that what it was? It was a pouting fit for 7,000 how much?
7 billion.
7 billion. Imagine where that money could have gone.
Oh, his
I
bank
don't know.
account.
Yeah, I just feel I haven't been on Facebook since then. I've used Messenger and I've deleted a bunch of people from Instagram. I'm trying to get away from the Facebook infrastructure though now. I can't go back on it knowing what they've done, you know?
Well, and that's the thing is like I like Messenger.
Hmm.
It just makes it easier to communicate cross-platform.
Yep.
And that's really the biggest thing about it is that the ability to communicate again, across multiple different OS systems is just it's so
Hmm.
much easier.
Agreed.
I don't like Facebook though. Like,
Mm-mm.
I mean, I got zucked the day after my birthday for making a joke, and so I landed myself in Facebook jail for 24 hours.
Wait, what did you do? Because I was so mad. I was like, both you and Debbie had birthdays right after this happened. And I was like, I'm not going back on Facebook. And then Jeffrey has a birthday. Debbie has a birthday. I was like, God damn it.
So one of my friends posted a meme that was saying that said, "Sometimes we are our own obstacle getting in the way," or it
Mhm.
was something. It was something like that. Sometimes we're our own worst enemy. And of course, I made the joke and had commented saying, "I know him, and I'll kill the bastard
Oh, boom.
because
Yeah.
it's me." And then I got zucked for inciting violence
Well, you did incite violence.
against myself, apparently.
Yeah, against yourself.
And so I was like, you've got to be fucking kidding me. Literally, you've got
Right.
people who are parading around with fucking swastikas, and you're like, nah, this is all great. Kill the Jews?
Right.
Cool. I'm good with that. I'm going to kill myself, inciting violence.
Right.
Like,
Genocide
fuck
in
you.
Burma, like devastation in
Uyghur,
Yemen. We're
Uyghur
we're okay,
Muslims
we're okay
being,
with sowing this stuff. In Ethiopia, we're causing uprisings, but Jeffrey can't say the word kill.
yeah, I can't make a joke about myself.
Right. That's a shame.
I laughed. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was funny as hell. It's like I got zucked for that. That's funny.
Uh,
That's fucking funny is what that is.
Well, what I did was I got rid of the Facebook app off of my iPad, and I'm hoping when I bring it back on, I'll get the notification that says, "Do you want to allow this app to track you across platforms?" And I can say no. Because somebody was saying if Facebook goes down, just somebody's going to take their place. And I thought, yes. And then I'll go into it knowing. Like I didn't know Facebook was going to harvest my data, for $50 a month profit. I didn't know that. And I'm not saying that I have a problem with them making a profit. I'm just saying that they didn't necessarily, I mean, they might have slipped it into a terms and conditions, but I didn't know it existed. I didn't know what data was.
Well, and that's the reality of like all of these large data collection sites, Microsoft, Facebook, Google,
Hmm.
Amazon. Um, Apple, they all have terms and conditions that are like 50 pages long. And I mean, that's the price of using the site is that they get to
Right.
determine what's on there and what's not. And the cost of your subscription is your data that they'll use and market and all that other fun stuff.
Right. Or if you're on Parler, your license and social security number, right?
Oh
They
my
can
God.
ask for anything they want. It's your choice whether to be on that platform or not. And I just can't go back to Facebook. I'm a Snapchat guy. Sorry. It's independent. Facebook doesn't own it. Twitter doesn't own it. And I'm not trying to sell Snapchat at this point. I'm on Twitter too. And I'm still on Instagram to some extent because the messages allow you to voice message and the blind group loves that, So I'm not saying I'm just minimizing my exposure to Facebook now.
And I get it. Like, I mean, to me, like if I could just have Messenger without the rest of it, I'd probably just delete the rest of it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Because
what I did, and my messenger still works.
oh, I mean, well, I wouldn't have like the actual like
Oh, the account.
profile.
Right.
Like I would just have an email that I could use for Messenger, and that
Yeah.
would be it. That's all I would do. Because
Honestly,
I don't use Facebook for really anything else
me
anymore.
neither.
It's not the tool, it's not the thing that I signed up to use back in what 2006
Right.
was I think when I signed up 2005 2006 somewhere in there.
Wow.
It's not the thing that I signed up to use. Back
Mm-mm.
when it was the college kids only, and all we did was post pictures, say random stuff, and poke each other for hours on end.
Right. Maybe play some Farmville.
I never even played Farmville. I hated gaming on Facebook.
I did too. I really did. And what bugged me was when that came out, everybody went into that. And I couldn't talk to like my sister unless I went into Yoville. And it was starting to get really annoying?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
no, it was absolutely insane. And so
Go
for me,
Zenga.
I mean, hey, it they did some great things for themselves with that.
Fucking
But
butt
man,
stock and Zenga. I'm such an idiot.
man, like it's just a bummer because I really enjoyed what Facebook was
Hmm.
and how simple it was. And I wish that you could go back to that simplicity
Yeah.
because I don't like, and I don't know that it would ever go, I miss the fact that we didn't have freaking news articles posted everywhere. And I miss the fact that it was literally just like you can post pictures, you can create a quick goofy status, and you can chat with
Yeah.
your friends for hours. I was fun. And then, and it became not fun.
Well,
Really
because
not fun.
the tapestry of America turned into politics and political views, and suddenly we're looking at potatoes politically, women's rights politically instead of emotionally and rationally. And
Yeah.
that's why we're working to get it back the other way and start talking about humans and community again. I just don't think you could gawk up to anybody at the grocery store and be, Mr. Potato Head is a liberal. I don't think you'll get
Oh my
away with
God.
that anymore. I'm
It was,
hoping.
it would be nice, but like, I didn't get that one. It's like, Potato Head's going to be gender neutral. It's like,
Yeah,
well, they're going to put everything in one box. So,
right.
sure, I guess.
And Ken and Barbie are gender neutral as well. Neither one of them has any genitals.
Genital neutral.
Right. Well, I was watching Bob's Burgers and I realized that Gene is like a non-gendered pansexual. And I love him now. And when I didn't like Gene because I couldn't understand his character, I saw him fall in love with a manatee puppet. And I was like, I like Gene. And it made me start thinking about other things that Gene does to just be gender neutral. And I love it now?
Oh, absolutely. And that was the thing. Like, I always saw that Gene was a little bit different. I was like,
Hmm.
okay, that's cool. We all do that kid who was a little bit different.
Right.
And now it's like, oh, okay, now we understand a little bit more why this kid is a little bit different.
But it's not bad. I mean, I was listening last night and he was like, I got two of mom's bras on, one on the top and one on the bottom. And I was like, fuck you, Gene, you're the best.
It's fucking hysterical. I love it.
Yeah, but I mean, we don't even notice these things. We're talking about like gay on TV. That's what I'm talking about. Sometimes it was just the subtleties, that you had to read into.
Absolutely.
I love it.
So,
So any good music? Any good music going on?
ooh, lots of
Like,
good music going on. Let's
like,
see here. A few different things to listen to. Ice Nine Kills is a guilty pleasure right now because
mm,
they've got the Silver Scream 2, which they're basically just doing a bunch of songs that are related to the old horror movie classics. I love it. Fantastic.
cool.
Um, and then there's a Japanese band out there called Dexcore that are just absolutely wild and they're killing it, and I love it.
Oh, I love that.
They are
Shows
they are
shows are coming
fantastic.
back. Isn't that amazing? Like bands get to play again.
Oh, dude, there's a bunch of bands that I've wanted to catch for a long time that are doing shows again, and one of my bucket list bands, Further Seems Forever, out of Florida. Um, I got to watch part of their Furnace Fest show on YouTube, and man, like if that band shows up in Seattle, I'm there, or in Portland, I'm there. I gotta go. I gotta see them.
Thank you. I've been trying to look for albums to buy, you know what I mean? So you gave me a couple of places to go.
So yeah, those are Further Seems Forever, definitely very in the vein of old Midwest emo.
Nice.
Actually was so Further Seems Forever is the band that Chris Carrabba of Dashboard Confessional. That was the band that he was in before he went to Dashboard.
Wow.
Yep.
And they're still going.
And Dashboard is still going, and Chris still does stuff with Further Seems Forever.
Nice.
So they've had three different vocalists. Unfortunately, one of them passed away.
Hmm.
Um, I like the stuff that he did. He wasn't my favorite of the Further Seems Forever vocalists. I like Chris as a vocalist for Further Seems Forever, but Jason, their second vocalist, he was like my favorite. I thought he
Nice.
had the best fit with the band.
So which album am I gonna buy then?
So my classics, I mean, honestly, I'd buy all of them
Hmm.
personally because the entire discography is great.
But I
Um,
want to start with Jason. I don't want to go to another
so
singer.
so in terms of their full albums, The Moon is Down is with Chris Carrabba, and that I would say that really sets the direction of what Further Seems Forever is.
Okay.
How to Start a Fire was released in 2003, I think, 2004. That's with Jason, and I would say that, to appreciate the band and its sound, like you'll hear the change from The Moon is Down to How to Start a Fire, and you will see why I say that it was the perfect fit. Like his voice was the perfect fit for them.
Okay.
Their next album, I believe, was called Light Up Ahead. Um, had John Bunch of Sensefield, and I mean, like all of the songs on that album are great, but it just didn't quite fit for me.
Hmm.
Um, and then in 2012, Chris Carrabba came back and did Penny Black with Further Seems Forever, and it's a fucking great album.
I like the title.
And so I know that, and now they're working on another album with Jason. Um, so there's a lot of rumors out there that maybe in the next year there will be a new album with Jason as the vocalist again. So I'm looking forward to that because that was how I found them and how I learned to love them was with
Mhm.
Jason. But I appreciate their entire discography. It's good, start to finish.
Okay. That reminds me of Faith No More. I discovered them with their last singer, Mike Patton. And
Hmm.
then I found their earlier albums and I was like, oh my God, this is so much better.
Right.
I'm not a clean punk guy. I'm a dirty punk guy. And listening to songs like Introduce Yourself or Crab Song or We Care a Lot, just that's my style of music right there.
Hmm. So
I love
there
you,
you go.
Jeffrey.
Love you too.
Thanks for being here. I know you got stuff to do. I just want to say to my friend Kai, your comment was reported for some reason, but I had no part of that. I just looked over at the end of the show and saw it. So Maybe she
Comment
reported
was
herself.
reported.
Yeah, I mean, we finally get a comment in the live stream and it gets reported. What the fucking life. Life is life. Thank you for trying, though, ukulele love. Bye, Jeffrey.
See you later.
Bye, Billy. Bye, Billy. I didn't even know you had a cat.
Come here. You want to say hi to Jason?
I didn't
Oh,
even
hi.
know you had a cat.
We got two.
Freaking. I don't know if I can podcast.